And we're back, and we just finished watching We Are What We Are from 2013, currently streaming on Amazon Prime. It tells the story of a reclusive family called the Parkers, who follow some ancient customs family traditions handed down from ancestors. That
Lamb's Day, what was it called?
Something. I gotta be honest, I'm still kind of shell-shocked from this movie. I'd heard it was good. I didn't really know anything about it going in, and I was really taken aback by the ending.
Yeah, the ending kind of, like, I was expecting
I think we can spoil this. This is from 7 years ago.
The family is the father, a mother, 2 daughters,
And a
young son. And the film begins with the mother just dying. Like,
yes.
It's not like you could see she's suffering from something, and she has an accident and dies. And so that's basically where we come in almost. And by the end of the film, we learn the whole family's tradition, what's going on.
Their big secret.
The big secret, the turmoil it causes with the daughters, especially it seemed the younger daughter was the one who was really conflicted. The older one you could see was conflicted, but
also felt like a sense of duty to family traditions, right?
And the father was just nuts. I mean, this is religious fanaticism at its finest. And I mean, he's the bad guy. He's the big secret's going to come out. He's going to get caught. He's going to pay the piper. But I did not expect him to go out like that.
So I have to say, when we were watching it, there's that, I guess after they buried the mother, it's basically implied that the oldest daughter, Iris, is now taking over for the mother.
The mother's duties in performing this,
and
she does to perform or to do the ritual or whatever that they.
You know what? I assumed that she was taking over some of the mother's responsibility. Somehow my mind went into a very dark place, and I thought it was going to be more creepy. I thought there was going to be some kind of conjugal relationship between the two of them. I'm glad it never got to that, although there was that one scene where, I mean, they're not laying down in bed. He's laying down in bed and she's sitting next to him.
Yeah, he's like, because he's sick. He ends up suffering from some neurological disorder that is caused by the ritual, but is what the family believes the ritual is going to purify them of all diseases and whatnot. That it's that this is what their family does
in order to
it's sort of like
survive.
A covenant with God.
Yeah,
and that if we do this, then God will make us all healthy and good. I get where you're coming from. There were times where I thought maybe there was. Eventually that was going to happen at some point, but other times not. I think that's up to interpretation.
Sure,
you could definitely put that
and I think the filmmakers, the writers and the director make they create a really good sense of just dread and just uncomfortableness throughout this whole piece.
Especially the performance by the dad.
Yes.
He was dark.
Yes,
and I don't know who that guy is, but he did a really good job.
Bill Sage.
Yeah, his face looked familiar to me.
He almost looked familiar, but
he almost had a Robert Redford look to him, but like thicker, and
he played David Van Patten in American Psycho.
I don't remember American Psycho too well, but anyway, I mean, he definitely played the part of a religious nut job.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like he was like screaming Bible verses or anything. He was very quiet, very menacing.
Yes, and that was the thing, right? Because he really, I mean, there was a scene where he gets mad and he's yelling, but for the most part, it's just like that simmering rage that's just below the surface.
It's a very quiet sort of menace.
Yes, and it's very creepy and unsettling, and
even when he's praying.
Yes.
Everything is it's not a whisper, it's just above a whisper. When he talks to anybody.
Yes.
When he's talking to Marge, the neighbor,
right.
When he's trying to thank her for watching the kids
the son
while something happened. even in that moment when he seemed to be sort of like having a kind moment. No, he thanked her because she like saw him kneeling in the ground after his wife. He learned of his wife's death, and he was clearly distraught by this. And she came and comforted him. And so I guess the following day he went to her and he gave her a gift as sort of like a thank you. And even in that moment, he still sounded menacing.
Yeah. There was just something about him that just wasn't right.
Yeah. And that carries on throughout the whole film.
Yes.
I mean, there isn't a single moment where you're like, oh, he does have his charm.
Or redeeming qualities. Yeah, no.
He has no charm.
Yeah,
He is just menacing. He's menacing to his children. The time you thought he got angry, was that the time when he yelled or swatted that little nugget of food out of his son's hands? Is that what you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
That was the only time I think he raised his voice.
Right.
I mean, even when he caught Iris and Anders,
together,
I don't think his voice got raised at all.
No,
he was mad at that moment too.
He was, yeah.
He was, yeah.
But it was almost like a contained rage, but you could feel it almost permeating out of him, which was kudos to the actor because he stellar. I agree, stellar performance. I mean, just really unsettling and creepy, and just. Oh, yeah. You wouldn't want to get caught anywhere with this guy.
Yeah. And you could tell, I mean, probably the girl who played Rose really showed that sort of like, you could see she was terrified.
Yes. Well, they were all terrified, I think. Even the son, although I think he was too little to understand the implications of it. I think that's the rabbit.
Oh, it's the rabbit.
But I think he was still a little too young to understand the implications of it, but I think still you could see it in the child too. Mm-hmm. I think they all had a healthy fear of him.
Yeah.
As they should, because I don't think that there was anything...
I got the impression that if it came down to it, I mean, we do know.
Yeah.
If it came down to it, he's going to kill his kids.
Yeah.
And it almost comes to that.
And it almost, yes. I feel like we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is...
the ritual?
The ritual, which came from, I
guess...
mean,
you can, if you see the trailer for the movie, which is also available on Prime, it pretty much gives it away.
Yeah.
There's lots of shots of gruel in the trailer.
I know you don't want to spoil it for people, but it's important. I feel like we have to mention it because I really want to talk about that ending.
Okay.
So many years ago,
if you don't like spoilers, just turn
turn this off now. Many generations ago, I'm assuming their family was caught without much provisions. So
it's sort of
the father
this
of
is
that family had to make do.
Right. We're talking like pioneer days.
Yes.
The father gives Iris a journal, a family journal, and they read it, and you hear about the family's history. And through this telling told by some daughter from far in the past, it's basically like the Donner Party. They get caught in the middle of an unforgiving winter when it's very cold. There's a mother and two daughters, and the father and the uncle go off into the woods to go look for food. The father comes back, says, the uncle decided to go on ahead and look for help. But look, I have a bag of meat. And, I mean, you don't have to be Sherlock Holmes to figure out where that meat came from. It's Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
And they're eating him.
Yes.
And this goes on, and I guess the father consoles himself by somehow converting this into a religious edict from God that we must eat the flesh of people. And then next to die is the mom, and kids are eating, and eventually they go into the cave where the father's hanging out, and they see he basically has the mother's body hung up, and he's just cutting off pieces, and then that's how the tradition begins. He tells the daughter, okay, here's the knife.
Now it's your turn.
Start cutting. You got to start cutting. And somehow this evolved into a ritual that this family, the Parkers, has held up because they've lived on this land. They've lived on this land for a very, very long time. There's basically a tree in their yard that falls down, and discover there's just like a ton of bones underneath it.
Right.
And it's not a tiny tree. This thing has been growing for quite a while.
Yeah. And then
they have a ritual. It's like they have to fast, which is why he yelled at his son. And then they find some girl, chain her up in a basement, and get her prepared for eating.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with the mother was the one who did all the butchering.
Yeah.
And now that the mother passed, it was up to Iris,
the oldest daughter, to
needed
take
Rose's
over.
help to do it. Rose is traumatized by it. It's pretty horrible.
Yes, and just again, a really good script. I mean, this story did not go where I thought it was going to go. I didn't know too much about it. I mean, I checked out the trailer. Somebody had recommended it. A friend of ours, or a friend of mine had recommended it. And I went into this not really prepared. And the ending to this movie, so let's talk about the ending, because the ending was not what I thought it was going to be.
Sort of threw me for a loop. I mean, I knew that the father was going to get his.
Sure.
But how he got his was unexpected, because throughout the film, I get the impression that Rose and Iris, they're not really down with this whole ritual.
No.
Especially Rose.
Especially Rose, right. Because she, at an earlier point in the film, basically says, well, what if we decide not to do this? What if we just leave? And then when they are tasked with having to dispose of somebody,
like I think Iris is sort of resigned to the fact that it has to be done.
But Rose basically says, I will never do this again.
Yeah.
So she's the one, and she even says to her sister, let's just get in the car and go. And she almost tries to prepare the little brother, like, you have to do everything I tell you to do. And then that's when they go to the final dinner sequence, where I guess Dad has made dinner, but with a October surprise, which was that I guess he was going to pull a Jim Jones and just kill everybody.
Yeah, well, he realized that the gig was up, because not only was a huge amount of, when that tree fell down and he started noodling around with it and all these bones came out, he knew that those bones are floating downstream. He was caught. On top of that, he had the cell phone of the deputy, and he saw the text message from the doctor that said, something's up with these Parkers.
Meet me over there, yeah.
So he knew that his days were numbered, so he was going to take the family to God.
Yeah. But it doesn't really work out that way.
Rose figures it out.
Yeah. And prevents the little brother Rory from eating.
Little brother Rory, then there's interruptions, and the doctor comes, and random stuff happens, and basically the father drags everybody back to the table, and he thinks that he's got it under control, and they're all going to eat and die. And he kisses Iris, and he goes to kiss Rose, and Rose rips his throat out with her teeth.
Yeah, that was a baller move. I was shocked because
shocked the hell. And, well, actually, no. I thought that was okay. This is desperate. This is the desperation move. It's sort of like poetic justice that he's getting his throat bitten out. It's desperation. She doesn't have a knife. She can't kill him any other way, so she's just going to bite him with her teeth. And then Iris gets in on it. She nails his hand to the table with a knife. But then she starts biting his arm.
Yeah, and they go to town on him like he's turkey dinner.
They are
Thanksgiving,
willingly, hungrily eating this man.
Yes, alive.
And it goes on for a while.
Yes, and that's the shocking part, right? Because
at least almost a full minute of them
just tearing into flesh,
and then lifting their heads up and chewing. And then diving back down and eating, and then lifting their heads up and chewing, and then diving back down and eating. And I was just like, what?
Yeah, it went on for a while.
What the hell is going on? And did the doctor die, or did he pass out, or I don't know?
I think he was still alive while they were feasting on the father.
He was watching them.
He was watching them, but I think he was close to dying. And I think
they left that open ended. So
no, I think he was dying. But I think so. Then Rose gives him the.
Well, I mean, he just got hit in the head with a frying pan, though.
Oh, true.
I mean, but he got shot in the shoulder, but that was like such a minor thing, and then he just got whaled in the head with a frying pan. I don't know.
You know what?
It's sort of that's
my interpretation was that he was dying, but I could be wrong. You're right. He didn't really have like life-threatening injuries, but who knows?
Unless the girls just took him out afterwards. But that would, to me, okay. I feel like that bit at the end, to me, up until that point, I was with the story, but then that point at the end seems so out of character.
Not necessarily. And do you know why? So this is why I find this movie completely horrifying but in a good way, because these kids, I mean, they're not little girls, they're adult young women.
Was 14. I would probably say Iris was. She
finished high school.
She was 18 at least,
if not older. She might have been like 19 or 20.
Well, no, because they just said that they hadn't seen her since high school, which was that previous year.
All right, so she's 18, 19.
She was like 18, 19, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. But so the reason why I find it truly, truly terrifying is because they've grown up this way. This is what they know. And even though part of them fears it, it's something that's, I don't know if it's comfort for them, but it's something that they inherently know. And I think the reason why the ending was so chilling and interesting is because I think when it was like innocent people, they had trouble reconciling with it. But because it was their dad who they feared and they loathed, they were more apt to be accepting of this tradition. So at the very end, it seems like they're leaving town. But this is something that they carry with them. So I think that if they ever find themselves in a situation where they feel cornered or put down by somebody, they will act accordingly, and they will know how to defend themselves, and they will know what to do with this person because they have years of this lifestyle.
I see sort of where you're coming from there. But the problem with it is, you're saying, okay, they have this lifestyle. Their lifestyle was eating a cooked pot of meat. Mm-hmm. It was just dinner. There was no savagery. There was no ripping of raw flesh with their teeth. Mm-hmm. They weren't animals. They were raised to just basically be
consumed.
They were raised to be just act in a very conservative manner. Mm-hmm. Be good. Everything else they did was good. The only thing bad that this family really did was kidnap a girl every year and eat her. The only bad thing. But that's what they grew up with. Mm-hmm. What happened at the end was absolute, like, brutally psychotic animal behavior. Mm-hmm. That it was eating a living human being while he was alive. It wasn't carefully butchering something, cooking the meat, putting it in a stew, seasoning it, doing everything that they did, and then sitting down neatly at a table with a bowl and a spoon. This was brutal psychotic behavior. This is the sort of thing that Rose felt horrified by when they had to kill the lamb. Mm-hmm. Okay? And I understand this was a really desperate situation, and that's why I was up to that. Right into that first bite, I was like, all right, she's got to do this. But then when Iris jumped in and she went for that second bite, mm-hmm. I was like, okay, this is not right. This is out of character now. This is not the thing that the traumatized person does. This is something that a maniac does.
But think about it. They grew up knowing what the score was. They'd never officially participated.
Not their whole life.
They had to have.
No. Did the little boy know?
I think he was.
No.
I think he knew.
Who did the little boy think was in the?
He thought it was a monster, but that was probably how it was explained to him. But these girls knew.
He had no idea who that person was in the basement or why they were there. He did not know at all.
He didn't know at all. But I think that at some point
in his life, they would tell him, yeah, we're eating people.
Right. And maybe he didn't know at that minute, but these girls knew. They were way older than him.
The girls did.
And I think that the chore of doing that fell on the women in the family.
Right.
It wasn't like a responsibility of the men.
But that was the mother's duty. And the mother, maybe she showed Iris. I don't think she showed Rose at all. Rose did not know what was going on. I don't
know that she didn't show Rose.
In that scene where they had to do it, Rose did not know what the hell was going on. She did not know what to do.
But it wasn't explained to her. All Iris said was, I need your help. I can't do this without you.
Right. But the mother...
But then Rose stepped in, and you could tell that she's not a willing participant, but she's on board with this, and she's doing this stuff too.
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. This is the first time she's having
to do this
pure experience with this thing.
Right.
And from that point on, up until that second bite, she's acting as a normal person would act in that situation. She's horrified. She's disgusted. She's like, let's get the hell out of here. Mm-hmm. Even before it happens, she wants to get the hell out of here.
Sure.
She is a sane person. Mm-hmm. Rose is sane. Iris, I could see, is starting to lose it.
Is she sane? Because think about it. This is something that's been handed down by generations. This family has partaken in these rituals for generations. Yeah. And again, the father is such a huge influence here with his crazy fanaticism, whether it's about religion or about the family custom. These kids have grown up in fear, and loathing. They finally get the upper hand, and that's when like the savagery comes out in them. And it's almost like I said it to you before when we were watching it, it's almost like they took pleasure in destroying him, because here was somebody that had basically crushed them to dust their whole lives as women. I mean, this is, I'm not really familiar. They didn't ever say what state they're in, but I'm assuming southern, what?
I think it was Delaware.
Delaware? Okay, well, they obviously live in poverty. They obviously live with very limited means. They live where no one's going off to college to be educated. They're going to live here, breed there, die there. Their opportunities are 0 to none. And on top of that, you have this just cruel and overbearing parent who crushes everyone's will, who steals everyone's joy. There is no happiness in that house.
No.
None. From the first frame, you see that, and the actresses do an amazing job of conveying this fear and they're victims in a way. And they are
victims.
Yeah, they are victims, but at the end, it's almost like they take that power back.
All right. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. But they were eating.
No, listen. I don't think it's supposed to make sense.
There's taking power back, and then there's just insanity. Like, if they just killed him, even if they killed him violently, that's one thing. Like, if they just stabbed him and kept stabbing him until he was mush, that's one thing. But they were eating him.
Yes.
They were enjoying eating him. And you get the impression throughout the entire thing, this was not a part of the year that they enjoyed. They did not like Labor Day.
Not at all. But I think having him succumb to them gave them a sense of power and almost joy.
But they could have easily gotten that power just by killing him.
I don't think they would have come to this if he hadn't tried to kill them, because the person who does it first is Rose. Actually, she's the one that attacks him.
Yeah,
and goes for his neck.
She bites his neck.
And it's funny because I feel like in a lot of ways she comes off as kind of like a meek character, but I think of the two sisters, she's actually the stronger one.
She is. In my eyes, Iris was broken.
Yes.
Like, she would have eaten that bowl of food if Rose hadn't stood up and bit that guy's throat out.
Right.
She would have just eaten it and let them all die. She was broken. Her one glimmer of hope as far as an exit to this thing was gone.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
And I don't even think she even knew that the food was poisoned. I don't
think so either.
I think she was just broken. I'll just eat this. I'll keep doing what Dad says.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, she basically says it previously. She's like, this isn't something you have to worry about. This is my responsibility. Remember? Mm-hmm. That she was taking over for the mother. So I agree with you. I think Iris was sort of just on autopilot, right? And just doing what was expected of her.
It seemed like that. And the little kid
Rose
was just oblivious.
Yes, the little boy was oblivious. I don't think he really... I mean, there was that scene where he says, oh, Dad's mad. And the father's just attacking that tree right before he notices the bones. So I think he's privy to that sort of rage hate from the father. But I agree with you. I don't think he's too in the loop with everything that's going on. There's that other scene towards the beginning where the father asks the neighbor to watch Rory, and he's like, oh, my son's too young for this. So I think he's being sheltered from it somewhat. But I think at some point the knowledge is going to be there, because this isn't something that you can hide. So, but again, I think that this was a total like Lady Macbeth move, where you feel like these kids are so downtrodden and so put down and so abused, but when it's time for them to fight for themselves, they do a good job of it.
No, I once again, I agree with you. I just don't think the cannibalism at the end was... To me, it just seemed out of character for the girls.
I don't know. I bought it. I thought it was a fitting end to that sort of chapter in their lives.
Sort of, yes. It has that sort of just desserts,
feel to it. Sure.
But as far as the film, the film didn't... that would be the sort of ending you would find in a fable or something like that. Or, oh, she got what she deserved. The punishment fit the crime. In a story that was being built the way it was being built, it just seemed like a step too far. At least for me. Yeah. It's just that's just what I got. Otherwise, I enjoyed the film.
Yeah.
And it's not like that ruined the film for me. It was just it left my jaw dropped. I felt maybe that was a bit too much.
No, fair enough. I, on the other hand, didn't feel that. I felt I was impacted by the grotesqueness of the scene, because it is jarring to see just two young women, these wispy girls, just
nice dresses,
just sort of just become these vampires.
Yeah, they were seriously, they were zombies.
Yeah, it was a very unsettling scene. But I think it worked, and I think it responded to this quiet savagery that they've had to live with their whole lives, and this feeling of powerlessness that they've experienced their whole lives, being under the thumb of this father and these family traditions that they have to do. Mm-hmm. So my big takeaway, at least, was I wonder what happens next as they're driving away out of town. Do they continue their family traditions, or do they start fresh and new and try to become different people? Part of me feels like they're already broken. They're already tainted. How do you come back from that?
Yeah.
There's no way.
You never know, and they definitely did make it seem like they would possibly continue, because she was holding that book.
That book, right. So I feel like some things people just do just because. I think we've talked about this, religious traditions. We're like, why do people do these things? They don't even know why they do these things. It's just tradition. Yeah. And I think in this sense too, they've grown up till now with these traditions deeply rooted in who they are as individuals. So I think that, I think these things are going to continue, but I think that they'll pick people who they think are worthy of this punishment. So it'll sort of even the scales for them, because they'll be able to continue doing what they're doing. And it almost felt like the other thing that I thought of when I was watching that scene was, and I think I turned to you and I said to you, they seemed to be taking pleasure in eating him, right? It was almost like you could see it on their face. It was like
a release.
It was like a release. It was like ecstasy. It was like interesting. And part of me wondered if in that moment something switched in them where they could sort of reconcile these horrible things that they've been forced to do to now something that they choose to do. Exactly. Okay, so scale of 1 to 10, what would you give this movie?
I'd give it a 7.
7. Okay. I would give it an 8. I think it's better than a lot of stuff that I've seen lately. It's very interesting. It's not something that we come across a lot. I mean, cannibalism as a subject is probably not something that you're going to go search for, but I think the filmmakers here and the writers do a good job of tying up all these really interesting elements together. You have elements of a family drama, you have elements of horror, you have suspense and thriller going on, and I think it works. I also like that added bonus of like the scenes from the ancestors, how these traditions started. I thought that was kind of a nice touch as well. I really like the ending, even the savagery of it. It felt like, yay, you guys got to kind of own this, whatever.
I liked the film throughout it. I thought all the characters were well done. I thought
the acting was intriguing. Solid.
The history of the family was nicely told. The only word, and I probably would have given it an 8, but for me that last bit just knocked it down a point, just because when you're built, for me at least, I feel when you build up a character in a certain way, you expect them to, I don't know, behave in a certain way, and when they behave so outside of that scope, it just seems a bit unnatural and a bit jarring. And perhaps that's what they were going for, just really make it jarring and shocking. And like you said, now they're choosing to do this thing that they did not choose to do before. But even in that case, to me, it's a long way between carefully preparing a meal and just eating an animal raw. So
no, point taken. I mean, I think you made good points, but again, my interpretation was different. I think from the female perspective, right? I mean, usually women are looked down on, treated poorly, especially in these types of situations. They're obviously very, very poor people. They don't live in a palatial situation. I don't know how they make ends meet, to be honest. It's not like he was working
in a trailer park.
Oh, is that what they were doing?
Yeah, he was like the owner of the trailer park. He owns all that land.
Oh.
Even all the way far up the river to where the graveyard was.
Okay.
And was just like, your papa owns all this? He's like, they're like,
still, I mean, they weren't living large. I mean,
they lived very modestly. Yeah. But
I would say even less than modestly. I think Marge the neighbor had a nicer setup in her house. I mean, nothing in the Parker's house looked like it had been touched since like the 1940s.
I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the power was out the entire movie.
Possibly, but still, even the clothes that the girls wore, even though they were nice, they were very old-fashioned.
I think that was intentional. That's supposed to denote the pious nature of the family.
Sure, but that's what I mean. The house itself, too. I mean, I don't know what his financial situation was, but the house itself, I mean, these people didn't buy extra stuff. They didn't put on airs. They weren't purposely remodeling the house to bring it up to more current conditions. So I don't know. I mean, again, when filmmakers don't feed you too much so that your mind can wander and make its own assumptions, and I think that's part of the story here as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it works for me. 8 from me, 7 from you. If you have the chance to check it out, absolutely recommend We Are What We Are, currently streaming on
Amazon Prime.
And that's it from us, and we'll come back soon. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.